Well, good morning, everyone, or I guess afternoon now. I am your guest facilitator for the day. My name is Cathy Wise. Your usual host is out doing a Christmas bird count today on the Salt River. So I'm really enjoying this. This is a lot of fun. So bear with me if things are a little bit bumpy, but I think I've got the hang of it. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us today. Our topic is Agua Dulce, Tucson Water's plan to restore flow to the Santa Cruz. And today's speaker is Timothy M. Thomure, P-E-E-N-V-S-P. Tim Thomure is the director of Tucson Water, providing potable and reclaimed water service to 725,000 people in southern Arizona. Tucson is widely recognized for its industry-leading water conservation ethic and a resilient water supply portfolio that provides water reliability to a desert region. Tim is a licensed PE with 22 years of experience working in public utilities, private industry, and consulting. He holds a bachelor degree from the University of Illinois and a Master of Engineering degree from the University of Arizona. He serves on the Board of Trustees for the AZ Water Association, is past president of Water Reuse Arizona, and serves on the National Board of the Water, Environment, and Reuse Foundation. Tim serves as the chair of the Steering Committee for Arizona Potable Reuse and recently joined the External Advisory Committee for the Water Resources Research Center at the University of Arizona. Tim, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, good. Well, everybody else is muted, so they can't answer. But okay, I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and pass the controls to you.
Okay, thank you.
And it'll just be a moment. And
okay,
there we are.
If you're seeing my opening slide, I think we're ready to dive in.
We're seeing it, or at least I'm seeing it.
All right, so hoping that technology works for us. Good afternoon for those of you in Arizona. I happen to be in Nevada today for the Colorado River Water Users Association meeting, so still morning for me, but happy to be here. And we're here to chat about Agua Dulce, which is a concept that the city of Tucson is bringing forward related to, and the subtitle kind of captures it pretty well, returning flow to the Santa Cruz River. Most of you do know that we do have some flowing stretches of the river even today. Largely they're effluent dependent stretches of the river where outfalls from wastewater reclamation facilities discharge water to the river, and so we have effluent dominated stretches of the stream. But that's not always been the case. From a historical perspective, there were perennial stretches of the Santa Cruz River, and it's one of the things that has been on the radar as something to do something about. In some cases, you could consider it the original sin of Tucson. Over the last 30 years, we've had a strong focus on our aquifers, on groundwater overdraft, and that's been appropriate because that is something that we needed to address. But before we even got to the point of overdrafting our aquifers, we dried up our river systems in the Tucson area. So Agua Dulce has multiple objectives that we're trying to achieve, but one of which would be a return of flow to the Santa Cruz River. And it's certainly caught the attention of the community, and many of the ideas or thoughts or objectives have been in the community conversation for some time, but until quite recently they weren't being advanced because they didn't have a champion that was in a position to be able to really advance it, to really commit to something that could be essentially done in perpetuity. until Agua Dulce came forward. For some additional background above and beyond what I provide today, there's a really nice article by Tony Davis that appeared on the Arizona Daily Star on November 11th. It does a really nice job of capturing the historical context and gives an overview of what's being presented in the form of Agua Dulce, and also he reached out to a number of folks to get their perspectives on it. Speaking for myself and what I've observed over the last about 2 months discussing this concept is it's got overwhelming support from the community and from many facets of the community. And the big question is it something we really can do? Is it something we can really pull off? And further, what are some of the obstacles that we're going to need to overcome in order to do this restoration in the Santa Cruz River? And there are some. It's not going to come without challenges, but it's definitely something that has a lot going for it and a lot of momentum behind it. So why now? Why 2016? And why this project? The Tucson Water Department has been going through a process of what we've referred to as rethinking reuse, and not from a standpoint of questioning the fact that recycling water, uses of reclaimed water aren't a good thing. They're a wonderful thing, and they've done great things for the community. But we need to look at what is the context of 2016 and in the near future from today, and what fundamental assumptions may have changed in our community, in our water resources portfolio, in our demand profile, that allow us the opportunity to reset the bar and rethink how we're going to do reuse into the future. So when we sat back and we really explored this, we identified a number of what we call realities from 2016 that allowed us the opportunity to kind of rethink moving forward. One is that the current Tucson Water reclaim system is largely built out. By that we mean the system was designed and implemented in a series of stages, and they were driven by, in most cases, large turf users. These are golf courses or other facilities that have a large water demand that could be readily satisfied through reclaimed water, non-potable water, and could be a logical extension of the system to allow us to lay the pipeline, have an economic case for doing so, and get large water users off of the potable system and onto the reclaim system. So it became essentially a branched network with these anchor customers on it, typically golf courses. Well, the vast majority of golf courses are already on the reclaim system, and in fact, we've extended the reclaim system to wheel water for others, including Pima County, including the town of Laurel Valley, including Metro Water District. So even golf courses outside of the Tucson Water service area have been able to be, in most cases, connected to the reclaim system. So that system has gotten all the low-hanging fruit. When we did do those extensions, we were able to pick up other customers, schoolyards, medians, parks, and other lower but still significant water users along the way. But the drivers to be able to do anything beyond that have essentially dried up. We've got the reclaim system throughout the community and to most of the large users. So that is something for us to consider about what do we do with the rest of our reclaimed water. Our current models for how we do pricing of water, how we do cost of service, and how we consider the reuse and recycled water business are based on 30-year-old assumptions. When we look at when the reclaim system was first developed, the drivers for that still exist, but we've accomplished a lot. The drivers being stress on our water resources, overdrafting of the aquifer, but we've done a lot over the last 30 years to address a lot of that. The next bullet is especially telling. The reduced demand in our community through conservation has delayed the need for new water resources. So whereas even as recently as 10 or 15 years ago, when we would project the demand for the community for water, it wasn't too far out into the future that we would see a gap where our currently developed supplies would not be sufficient, and we need to move up forward with developing additional supplies. With the conservation that's occurred over time, but most critically over the last 10 years, that demand has flattened out. Even with population growth, we use the same amount of water essentially in Tucson as we did in 1985. So we don't have that driver for developing the next water supply in an urgent manner. And the last bullet is tied to that, which is effluent availability is down. When we looked at previous projections of demand and you look at the amount of water that we expected to be serving to the community, not only did we have a demand for the water, but when we serve that much water, we generate a greater amount of effluent. Well, just like conservation has brought total water demand to essentially a level state, so is the generation of effluent in the community. So not only do we not have this demand gap that we were facing within the last decade, but we also don't have the volumes of effluent or reclaimed water that we originally thought we would have at this point. That creates opportunities. Once you recognize those realities, once you come to grips with them and start to think about how you're approaching the future, some opportunities do emerge and did emerge in this particular case. One is a recognition that as the water department, we have a core mission, but that core mission needs to benefit the community. That core mission needs to consider multiple benefits. And when we talk more about the specifics of Agua Dulce, you'll see how we consider that. We have opportunities to leverage partnerships. We, in the West, like to control our own destiny. We like to control our own water future. And we can still do that, but we can do that in partnerships as opposed to solely relying on our own means. We also had an opportunity to reduce costs. In a moment, I'll talk through what our current or previous master plans for reclaimed water were, and at least discuss in brief what the cost implications would be for that. By doing the rethinking reuse and looking at Agua Dulce as an opportunity, it's along with many of the other multiple benefits, certainly cost avoidance is also a factor. And despite what we may be doing in the near term through Agua Dulce, it still preserves our future flexibility to do the things we thought we would need to do with a higher demand and or with additional effluent availability. Namely, we're exerting control over the resource in the near term, and it still preserves our flexibility to utilize it in multiple ways in the future. So there's going to be a series of spreadsheet screen captures here that I'll talk you through. They get a little bit busy, but they kind of illustrate the current status of how the city's effluent is used, and we'll talk through what the previous plans did to reach us closer to full utilization, and then what Agua Dulce would do to get us to that goal, but with some key differences over what our previous plans were. This is a simplification of the view of effluent in Tucson. We could do a whole webinar just on who owns what effluent where. But to keep the map simple and for purposes of today's discussion, I went with the numbers on the screen. When you take all of the effluent generated in the metropolitan area and you distribute it to those who have an entitlement to it, which includes the Secretary of the Interior, who has an entitlement to a large portion of the effluent as part of the Southern Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act. You have the county has a significant share of effluent. You have the other potable water system providers also have shares of effluent through intergovernmental agreements. You end up with a current number of about 28,000 acre-feet of water that the city of Tucson has entitlement to. And we are using quite a bit of it. Depending on one key assumption, we're either using around 57% of it, or we're using about 76% of it, and I'll spend just a moment talking about the difference there. The difference is what is referred to as the conservation effluent pool. The conservation effluent pool was an agreement that set aside up to 10,000 acre-feet per year of regional effluent for environmental purposes. This pool of effluent has been available for 10 years or more. To date, our community has used 0 acre-feet of that conservation effluent pool for the environmental uses. That effluent pool is something that we need to both consider not for meeting water demands, because it should be used for the reasons it was set aside, and also we should plan for deployment of that conservation effluent pool, and Agua Dulce will help us do that as well. So whether you're looking at chasing the number of 57%, which would include no use of the CEP, or 76% where the CEP is in use, we do have a number of ways we currently use our reclaimed water. Our current reclaimed water system to city customers uses about 12,000 acre-feet of that water. And then the rest is discharged to the Santa Cruz River at essentially Roger Road and or Ina Road, and flows to the north outside of the city of Tucson, outside of our service area. So we get some indirect benefits from it through what we call a managed recharge facilities, where a proportion share of 50% of the effluent that does recharge becomes a water credit that we can utilize in the future. But as I stated just a moment ago, it's outside of our service area. So in many ways it could be considered paper water. Even though it physically does recharge, it's physically recharging in an area that we don't have direct access to it. In addition, there's a fairly significant amount of the city's effluent that flows completely out of the region. It flows into Pinal County, and it doesn't give a water management benefit, wet or paper water, to the city of Tucson. So knowing that we have some unused effluent, and we've had this for quite a time, we've been looking at plans in order to get to full utilization, to make full beneficial use of the effluent to the benefit of those who paid for and generated, which is the city of Tucson. So this next slide talks about our prior master plans. It builds on what we've done to date, which is the current reclaimed water system, which, as I mentioned earlier, is largely at build out. It will have some minor growth into the future, but we've gotten all the low-hanging fruit there. There would still be some flow in the Santa Cruz River from Roger Road north, but we'll be augmenting our reclaimed water system with a couple of things. One is SHARP, which is the Southeast Houghton Area Recharge Project. This is an off-channel or outside the channel recharge project in the southeast part of the community, which is upstream from most of our service area. So it's a good place to do recharge. That's a facility that's been designed. It is in our capital program in order to develop it within the next 3 to 4 years, and it'll give us some additional capacity to recharge our effluent, and it will generate both a paper water and a wet water benefit to us. We've, in our master plans, always considered the conservation effluent pool as something that needs to get into use. It's 0% currently, but it does need to get into use. And the city's share of that is approximately 7,000 of the 10,000 acre feet. So we need to assume that that's being utilized. But currently we don't have uses inside the city where the city has a beneficial use as opposed to outside of the city. And then our prior master plans were certainly putting us on the path toward potable reuse in the Tucson community. That was driven by water demand and need, and also the urgency to get our effluent to close to 100% use. We still have drivers toward exploration of potable reuse. We still have very valid reasons to continue down that path. But when you look at what our prior master plans called for, that we would have had about a 1 million gallon per day demonstration facility within the next 5 years, which comes at quite an expense. So while we would be manufacturing water to the system, it would come with a large expense, and we certainly have some regulatory and public acceptance barriers to overcome. Now, if we shift gears toward Agua Dulce, that doesn't mean we don't continue to pursue that concept. It doesn't mean to investing in it. What it does mean, though, is that we can delay the implementation of it and also reduce some of the costs in the near term. So let's take a look at what that would look like. Before I shift to the next slide, even the current plan, because of what we're able to afford as far as utilization through potable reuse, we're still only getting to either 68 or 91% use of our effluent because we're still not accessing all of the effluent in the near term. So here's a slide that talks about proposed refinements. Again, it builds on what we currently do, which is our reclaim to the customers. It includes some flow, and when the acronym SCR-MUSF refers to the managed recharge facility that's fed by the Roger Road wastewater treatment facility or the Agua Nueva plant. It's still built on assuming that we implement SHARP, and then we layer Agua Dulce on the top. And Agua Dulce, in brief, is deployment of the reclaimed water in the downtown area. Through Agua Dulce and our other actions, we can get to 100% beneficial use of the city's reclaimed water, and we can get and facilitate deployment of the conservation effluent pool in ways that I'll describe in a moment. But it comes with a number of additional benefits that we'll talk about when we talk about the actual project itself. So when we talk about Agua Dulce, subtitled the Santa Cruz River Heritage Project, we're talking about deployment of effluent in the downtown Tucson area for a number of potential benefits. One would be more efficient water management. The crux of this concept is doing recharge of the aquifer with our reclaimed water through the Santa Cruz River instead of at the expense of the Santa Cruz River. The map on the right-hand side of the slide is essentially the downtown area, a little bit north of A Mountain, essentially up to Congress Street, and it's essentially just a snapshot of basic setting the context of where this effluent may be going. And we're focused on the Santa Cruz River itself, and we're focused on the region of downtown that's on the west bank. It's an area that's gotten a lot of attention recently, but many parts of it are undeveloped as of yet. We do have the Sunlink streetcar route that does loop through that west part of downtown. We do have the Caterpillar headquarters that site's under development and is going to be making its stake on the west side of downtown and providing an anchor of economic activity on that west side of downtown that can fuel some of this Agua Dulce concept. And then you have also the Mission Gardens and the Mission Complex along Mission Lane, which are significant historical and cultural features of Tucson that the local community has had a long-term interest of trying to revitalize and get to something that honors the historical setting and provides some cultural enrichment for the Tucson area and really preserves or restores some of our history. So there's a lot of potential on the west side of downtown, and the streetcar is a good step toward unlocking it. Caterpillar really is really fueling all of this, but through the deployment of water, we think we can do even better and really spur some activity on that side of town. The more efficient water management would come in the form of generating recharge through the Santa Cruz River bottom by discharging water into the Santa Cruz River in 2 or 3 locations, creating a perennial flow for those stretches of the river as far as that water would flow based on the volumes available. That water would both infiltrate and create recharge, but it would also develop an urban riparian area. So we're restoring some of the perennial flow and restoring an urban riparian area through the heart of downtown Tucson, which has a direct environmental benefit, but the cultural benefits to the community are incredible, because it would be in an area that's very accessible and a area that's very visible and lends itself well toward being embraced by the community. I mentioned the historical and cultural community projects, but namely Mission Gardens is a historical irrigation area. There used to be, in historical times, an acequia that ran from the Santa Cruz River, withdrew water from the perennial flow and transmitted it westward toward Mission Gardens through some canals that then led to some gardening activities there and food production. We'd be looking at not necessarily restoring sufficient flow in the river to be able to flow the acequia from the river to the gardens, but if we did some off-channel outside of the river, created an opportunity to bring water from our reclaimed water system to the Mission Gardens, we could not only provide water so that we could do more with Mission Gardens and more with the restoration of Mission Lane, but also perhaps flow water backwards from its historical context and back toward the Santa Cruz River for recharge. And then finally, sparking economic development. It's a critical factor here because you need to have multiple benefits. You need to have multiple beneficiaries so that you can access multiple sources of revenue in order to develop this. And one of the concepts that's also included with Agua Dulce is doing an up on the bank, winding through the west part of downtown, some form of a line channel walk. When I picture this, I'm picturing the San Antonio River Walk, something along those lines, which is an amenity that is a draw for economic development, but done in a Tucson appropriate context and done in a way that it becomes a conveyance of reclaimed water from our underground reclaimed water piping through this surface channel along its economic and cultural and historical developments alongside of it, can be the way to deliver water to Mission Gardens, but also become a way to deliver some portion of the water that we're trying to get to the Santa Cruz River itself. We're very confident that by doing that and making that available, there would be a strong economic development tied to that, which could bring all of this together for us. So when we look at water in the Santa Cruz River, water to the cultural and historical amenity areas of West Downtown, and water for economic development, you can see the multiple benefits that we're attempting to acquire here. The next slide is essentially a brochure, and I'm not expecting you to read this off the screen, but I do want to touch on a couple of key features of this. One is the potential benefits of Agua Dulce, which I mentioned, are water management, urban riparian restoration, historical and cultural community projects, and economic development. Those are key reasons why to do that. The opportunity is that our current reclaimed water system has capacity to move water to the downtown area, to provide the mechanism for us to utilize it in this area, and it's built infrastructure. So we're actually would be tapping into unutilized capacity in the reclaim system and bringing more of our effluent into use. And the third key point that I want to really stress on this particular slide is that Tucson, our water future is secure, and doing this only augments it. It is something that is a different way of viewing how we do water management, but it's also something that brings multiple benefits with it and still supports our long-term reliability and sustainability. We have our strong commitment to conserving water and using it efficiently. We have planned for and have expanded the use of our renewable water supplies, including Colorado River water and effluent. And we've been storing water for the future over the past several years. So we've got a very secure water future and an opportunity to do more with our effluent than we've done historically. So what are some next steps? We certainly need a lot of partners on this concept, both to develop and implement it. Pima County is one of our key potential collaborators on it. We've met with them on this concept, and you have at least two main elements from Pima County with respect to Agua Dulce. One is Pima County operates the wastewater facilities that treat the reclaimed water, and that we utilize through our reclaimed system and also would use in Agua Dulce. So they're certainly a key partner on water management itself and how we access our reclaimed water. They're also managers of the Pima County Regional Flood Control District. And when we talk about putting water into the Santa Cruz River, we need to understand the multiple functions of the river, which we're looking to add riparian habitat, right, and restoration and water recharge, but it's also got other functions, namely flood control. It's a major conveyance for flood flows in our community. We need to do something that's compatible with its capability to do that. And in fact, the county is looking at doing some maintenance of the Santa Cruz River through downtown because of decades of sediment buildup and lack of maintenance. They're going to have to do some projects there. So how do we collaborate, work together, and allow them to do what they need to do in order to restore flood flow, and then reset the vision for the Santa Cruz River through downtown in a way that will have now a flowing stream, will have riparian habitat, and be able to maintain it into the future. We're having a number of meetings with stakeholders, Menlo Park and other local folks who live in the community of West Downtown. And this is something that needs to be done in ways that's very compatible with what their vision is for their part of Tucson. The Community Water Coalition is a strong group of water-conscious folks that have been very vocal on not just water management, but things like riparian restoration, and have been seeking ways to use the conservation effluent pool, which we'll be able to do through Agua Dulce. And others like members of the business community, the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, and others. These are just examples of the outreach that's been ongoing. And there's something in it for everybody. And as long as we're all working together and identifying any barriers and ways to overcome them, we're going to be successful. The utility itself also has some things that's advancing. One is permitting. It sounds pretty bland, but it's actually critical to being able to make all of this come together, is to have the authority to put the water in the river channel, to have the authority to generate the water management, the groundwater credits that we're hoping to do. You have to have all that in line so that the benefits actually do accrue. You need to have that certainty through the permitting process, and there's multiple permits required, and it's certainly a matrix of things that we have to navigate. Then there's the engineering itself. We've got a concept. We have some high confidence that we can do many elements of it. We do need to do some additional engineering to verify some of the critical factors. If I were to weight them, I would say that our ability to engineer a solution to get water into the river channel and recharge it is absolutely certain. There's no doubt that we're able to do that. So assuming we can permit it, we can absolutely engineer that. When we look at some of the off-channel features like the channel walk itself, the ability to move water to Mission Gardens, we're confident that there's engineering solutions to that, but it does require some additional work to get to a higher degree of certainty, and also to really lay out more than just a concept. Eventually, we need to start putting a line on a map. We need to start tracing a route, and that's where it's going to get very interesting, and you need all the stakeholders working together on that. But throughout this, we need to be in lockstep with all the downtown development activities. With Caterpillar coming in with other activities of Rio Nuevo, the timing is critical to make sure that not only is this on the radar, but it's on the radar and being developed in concert with these other activities in the west part of downtown, so that we don't box ourselves in or get to a point where we built some infrastructure that then precludes some of the multiple benefits we're trying to achieve here. So the timing is good. The timing is now, and we're definitely very active in those discussions to make sure that thinking about Agua Dulce is being done at the same time as any other activity in the West Downtown. So with that, we it really covers essentially where we're at in the process, and it covers a lot of what the concepts are. I'm glad to take any questions that may have come in and or that would be provided through the chat feature on the webinar.
Thanks, Tim. I'm not seeing anything coming through on the chat, so I'm just going to unmute the lines and let people ask questions. Whoops. All right, so I think everybody should be unmuted. So if you have a question for Tim, please take this opportunity to ask him.
I did see one come in through the chat just now, and so I can start with that one. The question was, how would Agua Dulce or putting water into the river channel through downtown impact the existing riparian area that is currently being supported by flows from Roger Road and Ina Road? And that's certainly something to consider. The more water that we move to other locations, even if it is in the Santa Cruz River through downtown, would certainly decrease the amount of effluent that's being discharged further north. There's going to be a trade-off there, and I'll make my pitch for why I think that's an okay trade-off. One is that the previous plans all considered taking the vast majority of the effluent out of the river in its entirety. So when you compare Agua Dulce to the status quo, you need to think in terms of status quo of there is no effluent flow in the river, even or very minimal from Roger and Ina Road, because all of the effluent is being put to some form of off-channel beneficial use, either directly or recharged off-channel. By doing it through the river channel through the downtown area, we're relocating that flow, but we're doing it in a way where the city could commit to it in perpetuity, because we're getting both the paper water management benefit and the wet water recharge, where it will be a benefit to the city. So there's no longer a driver to eventually pull it out of the river channel entirely if we're doing it through the downtown area. The next point of that is, and I'm not a riparian ecologist, so I admit that freely. My understanding is that the river channel through downtown, doing it in a very managed approach, managed but natural, being done in an environmentally sustainable way, would be a superior riparian habitat. Again, this is feedback I'm receiving from others than much of what's occurring further north, and it's also going to significantly increase the community's awareness of the benefits of riparian habitat, their ability to experience it and benefit from it directly in the downtown area will be enhanced. And then the final piece of it is the ability to actually take significant volumes to the point where you would really diminish what's coming out of Roger Road. I think we're essentially at the point where we're essentially at a base flow out of Roger Road into the river for that stretch from Roger to Ina. It's really difficult and expensive to access much more than what we do currently. So through the leveraging of the conservation effluent pool, not only would we be able to commit to it in the downtown area, we'd be able to commit to it from Roger to Ina. And then there's a significant amount of effluent still unutilized out of Ina Road, so there would still be a significant flow out of Ina. So I kind of spent a bit of time addressing that question, because it's a question that comes up, and it's certainly a valid concern. I think the net benefits of what we're proposing here definitely compensate for that and provide significant multiple benefits to accrue. To come in.
So Tim, there's another question, and this one's from Mary Walker. You said that the water model's assumptions are 30 years old. How are they being updated?
So the main fundamental update is on per capita water usage in the community. So this ties to the conservation discussion. And when we look at previous projections of water demand, you're always looking at, population projections, which, you can have, it can be higher or lower than what you're assuming. But, it's something that you can at least get a good handle on. And then to project water demand, you look at the per capita water usage of your community times your population, and that comes up with the water that you need to have developed in order to satisfy that demand. What's really changed is the per capita water demand in Tucson and many other communities has gone significantly down. Just rough numbers, when we last did a major revision of our water resources plan in 2004, our community used about 177 gallons per capita per day. That's total water use for all uses, potable and reclaimed. But 177, which at the time was still a relatively low number compared to our other communities in the West, we're down close to 100 now. And that is a significant amount of water that we don't need to treat and deliver on a daily basis, which means your existing water supplies are stretched much further. So that is one of the most fundamental assumptions that has changed. The other one is when you are not delivering as much water as you thought, you're also not generating as much return flow through the wastewater system, so you're not generating as much effluent. So those two things really run together, and they're quite a bit different from what we had been thinking as recently as 10 years ago, but certainly 30 years ago.
Tim, we have another question. This is a good one. Do we have to worry about the smell? And that's from Jean McLean.
Well, thank you, Jean. The reclaimed water itself is actually a very highly treated water product. When we associate smells with water, we're often associating things with the wastewater conveyance system. That's not the same quality of water by any stretch of what we're talking about here. So there's really not the same odors as you have with a wastewater collection system or with a wastewater treatment system. You have a very clean water. The other is if you have stagnant water and you can have biological activity that accumulates in the water and can lead to smells, especially with the way we're talking about deploying the water. You're not talking about stagnant water, you're talking about a flowing water, you're talking about water that's recharging at a relatively high rate. So I would argue that odors would not be a significant issue with this Agua Dulce.
Okay, it looks like we have another question from Mary Walker. Are you taking into account the reduced availability due to extended drought and climate change?
And climate change, which part of our considerations from water supply perspective, the main water supply to Tucson is from the Colorado River. It's no secret that the Colorado River is in peril. We're very close to a shortage that could be declared within the next few years. That's one of the reasons I'm in Nevada today is dealing with those issues. But how that impacts Tucson is very indirect and is something we've been planning for and preparing for decades. So when we look at what is the risk of drought or climate change on water supply in Tucson, we have a number of defenses already in place. The first one being the conservation itself, which is stretching our water supplies much further than they would be otherwise. So that's something we can't lose sight of. That's something we need to continue to maintain and or achieve even better to improve resiliency. The second one is we've been storing our unused available water that's been available to us in the near term for the future. We've got several years worth of water renewable water supply from the Colorado River that's already stored underground. A third one is partnerships. We have a number of partnerships both locally and with the Phoenix Valley that allow us some flexibility to move water to and from Tucson in order to be prepared for drought and climate change. Another really key factor is our priority to the reduced water supply from the Colorado River. And what I mean by that is that while the Central Arizona Project, which is how Tucson gets its Colorado River water, is a low priority relative to other rights holders on the Colorado River, namely California has a higher priority on river uses in Arizona, like namely the Yuma Valley area, are higher priority. The CAP has a priority system within itself. So it's a significant volume of water that will be curtailed, but Tucson is amongst the highest priority rights holders within the CAP. So when we look at all the planning that's gone into place for when shortages would occur and how the cutbacks would affect different water users in Arizona, Tucson is amongst the highest priority, therefore the least impacted. And the marginal amount of cutbacks that we could even view in some of the worst case scenarios on the Colorado River, which do include projections of climate change, show that our cutbacks would be very minor, if any. And right now we're not even seeing any cutbacks that cut our access to Colorado River down toward what our current uses are. One of the very interesting things about Tucson is we are the largest municipal and industrial rights holder on the Central Arizona Project, and our rights to water is about 50% higher, 40 to 50% higher than our current demand. So even if and when things got to the point where our allocation would be impacted, it's not even until significantly cutbacks within our own allocation that we would even be impacted on our daily ability to deliver water. So long-winded answer to just hopefully give you some reassurance that Tucson's in a great position from a water supply perspective because of all those factors working together. And so as that pertains to Agua Dulce, it is it's compatible and it's increasing our resiliency, because at the end of the day, what Agua Dulce provides to the community is renewable water, recycled water, recharged into our local aquifer in an area that we could access it in the future if we ever needed to. So even if all else failed, which we have 5 or 6 layers of protection there, we still have our groundwater resources, which have many decades worth of water available to us. And Agua Dulce would only be adding to that volume of water right underneath our feet that we could access if we needed.
Any other questions out there? Can anyone identify the duck on the slide? In spirit of the Christmas bird counts. That's a female pintail. I'll just give it to you this time.
I will accept your conclusion.
Any other questions? All right, well, we're going to wrap this up, and thank you so much, Tim, for your time, and to our participants for joining us today. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you for having me. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Bye. you.